Okay, so we're going to begin this evening with our 4 speakers, who I'm going to introduce in a moment. Then we'll move on to a wider discussion where you can ask questions, you can share your thoughts, and then we'll finish with a workshop where we'll divide up into different sort of regional groupings and we'll share some of the ideas we have for next steps. And the plan is that we'll wrap up at 9 p.m. And we're quite good at finishing on time as well, so let's hope we manage to do that too. So also, just before we start, I want to draw your attention to 3 photographs over here. Earlier this year, we held a photography competition on the themes of pattern in nature and wild swimming. And these 3 highly commended entries are for sale this evening. If you'd like to buy one or more, if you want to make yourself known to me at the end of the evening, we've got a card machine and all of that stuff. So, our speakers. We have Alice Roberts, Laurie Elks, Antoinette Fernandez and Caroline Day. And I've also just got to say that John Cryer sent his apologies. He's obviously on his way to the Lords as we speak. So first up, Alice Roberts. She is Head of Campaigns for CPRE London. That's the London branch of the Campaign for Protection of Rural England. She's spearheading CPRE London's 10 New Parks for London campaign, of which East London Waterworks Park is one. And perhaps most important of all, it was Alice that encouraged us way back in 2019 to think about what we wanted to happen to the Thames Water Depot site when the planning application for the 2 free schools was turned down. So we're just going to blame everything that's happened since on Alice. So tonight Alice is going to share her thoughts on why it's essential we protect our green spaces in London from inappropriate development. Alice Roberts.
Very exciting. So where shall I start? So CPRE London is a very, very small charity. There's like three of us part-time. I'm called head of campaigns, but I'm like head of just myself really. And we do the kinds of things that you would probably expect us to do. So we talk about the countryside a lot. In the context of London, we talk about the green belt. And obviously you've probably heard in the news that that's become quite a controversy lately with the new Labour government promising to lost my words, to reduce the protections, I guess, and to talk about grey belts, which is a whole other term, but it's actually kind of relevant to what we're talking about today in many ways, and I might come back to that. I'm personally local-ish. I live on the other side of the Leibridge Road roundabout, so all of this area is extremely familiar to me, and it's been a great disappointment to myself, as well as no doubt all of you, that things have gone the way that they have. But let's hope that they can, that the amazing campaigning that you've been doing can get back on track, and that this dream can be realised. So, one of the other things that we do, to kind of talk a bit more about where we started, was that we support local groups around London who are, one of the big things, main things I do is support groups around London who are campaigning to either save green spaces or to kind of get on the front foot and try to take a green space and to turn it into something which actually helps to protect it into the future. So these are sites which are often neglected. So one of the things we were doing back 8 or 9 years ago when I first started, was we noticed that the government was buying up protected land around London, and that was green belt and metropolitan open land. And obviously this was really disturbing because for a government body to buy up protected land with a view to building free schools, which is what it was doing at the time, is highly prejudicial to the planning system, and in our view was entirely challengeable. And so we did a publication called A Done Deal, and highlighting all of these sites, and one of them was lost, but to date the rest have been saved. And then thereafter that stopped, so we didn't hear of any more sites being purchased. But unfortunately, this was the one site where they did actually buy it rather than take an option or just talk about it. So that's, I think, one of the reasons why this one is so complex. So yeah, back when that happened, and then the council said that they couldn't build a free school here, and we got together and with Abby and started to talk about, what were the ways forward for this site, and I felt very, very strongly that if nothing was done, that we would just be waiting for the next planning application, and that would happen and that it would be gone. So that was where it all started, I guess, and from there, this amazing thing has happened, and I have to tell you that, that such is the success of this, that I'm working with 10 other, or 9 other sites around London, but there isn't any which has got this kind of level of involvement and commitment and has got as far as this one. So it's absolutely amazing. But it did kind of spur me on to form the 10 New Parks campaign, and it occurred to me, that's when it occurred to me, that this was such a massive problem. And since then, it's really become an even bigger problem. So you find, and every case is different, but actually in many of the cases around London, you find protected land is basically land banked, so it's left. To become derelict and neglected, and then of course, somebody can start to call it grey belts or whatever, whatever term you want to use to try to enable development, I suppose. And one statistic which I would like to say, which is just really in view of this argument that we need to release greenbelt land or protected land in London, which is that there are 350,000 planning permissions in London, planning permissions for 350,000 homes which haven't yet been built. And that's a 7-year supply if you build it 50,000 a year, and we know that that's very unlikely to happen. So I'm trying to continually say, this is not about the planning system, and it's not about greenbelt. That's just kind of slightly side issue. I just thought I should mention it though, because it's one of the things that I'm confronted with right now, a massive threat to our greenbelt in London. So yeah, we put in an objection, and a lot of these arguments to the planning application, and a lot of those arguments will be familiar to you, but I did want to just go through them briefly. So the first thing that we'd said was that building on this particular piece of metropolitan open land was not just a threat to this particular piece of land, but it is of course a very important key piece of the bigger picture. And to our minds, that meant that the harm strongly outweighed the benefits. Of course, the second thing that we said was that there is an exceptionally well-considered proposal on the table for using this piece of land, and that meets many of the Mayor's important objectives around water management, particularly water management, and indeed biodiversity habitat, for which he has very, very big targets for creating additional habitat around London. And so to take an opportunity like this and to just not do it and to do something else just seems to our minds to be undermining their own goals at the GLA. And the third important thing I felt was that, I was sitting in Hackney watching schools close around me. And obviously that is not great because, the reason for that is that we're losing families from areas where they simply can't afford to live. But the reality is there are going to be empty schools soon in London, in inner London, and in this part of the world. So, the idea that we have to take a piece of open land and build on it and lose it forever when we've got empty schools just takes me right back, and many of you probably, to the time when, loads of the schools in Hackney, certainly, and probably here, were turned into flats. And then they wondered why they had nowhere to put schools, when things changed and turned around again. So yeah, the depot site was also an incredibly important piece of industrial heritage, and the thought that will be lost is just devastating to everybody, I think. So those were the objections, and like I said, I'm sure you're kind of pretty familiar with those. And I just feel like, the way that this case demonstrates how important it is that we fill that space for those sites around London which have been deliberately, as it were, targeted, is so important, and we have to get ahead of the game as much as we can. And this is just one of very many sites, and we're currently mapping derelict and neglected sites around London. You never know which bit is going to be targeted next, but you can bet your bottom dollar that that there are sites, everywhere. Where planning permission will be submitted soon. In fact, somebody contacted me today with a bit of land in Greenbelt land in Hadley Wood, and it's just, I looked on, because I'm good at looking at Google satellite view now, and I can tell when pieces of land have been just left to dereliction. You can tell they're not used, they're not in agricultural use, they're not playing field and so forth. And so it was really clear to me that this piece of land had just been left, and I thought, well, there you are. That's that just exemplifies what we're talking about. So I can only really just kind of end by saying thank you so much to everybody who's put in so much effort. It's impossible for us at CPRE London, with covering the entirety of London and with virtually nobody, or just a very few small people, to really make the impact. It's entirely up to local groups, and so we just incredibly grateful that there is such an amazing group in this part of London, and we really, really hope and wish that you are successful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for putting the idea in our heads in the first place. So next, Laurie Elks. Laurie has lived in Hackney since 1972. The book he edited for Hackney Society, Hackney Portrait of a Community, describes the many changes there have been over the years. Laurie's commitment to holding the Lee Valley Regional Park particularly to account and defending our precious green spaces goes back to the 1970s when he first arrived in the area and when he helped set up the Lee Valley Association. He's been involved in the campaigns to save Walthamstow Marshes, Middlesex filter beds and Stoke Newington reservoirs. And tonight he's going to tell us about the history of the site that we want to transform into East London Waterworks Park, basically how we got to where we are. Over to you, Laurie.
Hi, as time is tight and to stop myself rambling, which I tend to do, I'm going to read my presentation about the history of this site. Okay, about the history of this site, how we've got into this mess. In case I don't have a chance to say it later, I think that the Waterworks Park scheme is wonderful. It's by the people and for the people, and that in a way is why the authorities don't get it. A pool I'm particularly fond of is the miners' pool at Ingleton in Yorkshire. It was bought, built, dug, maintained by the miners for the community. Pell's Pools in Lewis is another. It's doable, but we have to instill some belief. The site, as you know, was a water treatment station, built in the 1850s and remaining in operational use till 1969, when the current treatment works were opened at Coppermill and Walthamstow. After that, the site was redundant, mostly redundant to Thames Water's requirements. The Waterworks site is in three parts. On the Middlesex side, to the west of the river, are the wonderful Middlesex beds. Thames Water offered that site to the Lee Valley Park Authority back in the 1980s, and the Park Authority had the great idea of filling in the filter beds to make some extra football pitches for Hackney Marshes. As a result of some persuasion by myself and others, and an excellent assessment by London Wildlife Trust, the authority changed their mind, and it's been run as to my mind, very fine nature reserve since the 80s. The Park Authority then was more committed to nature and conservation than it is now. I think they've gone back a long way since then, although the Park Authority, if they were here, would probably disagree with me. And after taking on the Middlesex beds, they took on the equally wonderful, maybe even more wonderful, Essex beds. I went to the Essex beds practically every day during COVID. I just think it's superb. And no money, I think, at all changed hands. These were valueless sites. The Thames Water was happy to get rid of them, and the Park Authority took them on. That leaves the middle section, which is the section we're talking about today. 6 filter beds and the Victorian pumping station, which would be an important part of the Waterworks Park. Thames Water applied in the 1980s for the consent to turn this over to a temporary pipe store. Since then, they've used it for a variety of purposes, including the massive London water mains replacement project, and they've totally trashed the site, up to now, as you know. The idea that this still operational site should become a development site, a property play, came much later. This land was and is metropolitan open land, and it's part of the park, which is designated for the enjoyment of recreation and leisure. The Park Authority, in its successive master plans, has always designated the Thames Water Depot as part of its ambitions. The current plan offers a commitment, and I quote, to work with Thames Water, London Borough of Waltham Forest, and other stakeholders to identify options for development at the Thames Water site that will bring this site into a park-compatible use. I don't think they've ratted on that yet, but I'm pretty sure they're going to do so, unfortunately. So all in all, there was not much development potential there for Thames Water. So when the Olympic Games came along, the proposed Olympic site included a good deal of land owned by the Park Authority, and the Park Authority were required to give it up with a proviso that they would be provided 2 acres of land for every acre of land they give up to the Olympic site. And there was the Thames Water Depot, which wasn't really wanted by anybody, and the Park Authority was offered it for nothing, and they turned it down. So if they don't want it, can't think what to do with it, can we have some money instead? And so that's what happened. They had money, and that's helped to pay your wonderful ice rink and other facilities which you know and love, but they weren't interested in this. So Thames Water, which by now of course is in private ownership, thought maybe we could make a few million quid after all. And they put out a private document with the property world inviting expressions of interest. Thames Water were candid that any developer would need to do some arm twisting to get development, but implied it was well worth a try. Then 2 gentlemen you may remember came along, called Michael Gove and Dominic Cummings, with a wizard idea of building some free schools on green sites in London. The government's Educational Skills Funding Agency paid a whacking sum. I think it was 27 million, but it was
33 plus that.
33 million plus that. That this was a ludicrous sum was all the more clear when Waltham Forest turned down the free school application. Not only because they judged that the school wasn't needed, but also because they stood by the designation of this site as metropolitan open land. I remember predicting to Abby that this application was so manifestly hopeless that the government would appeal the decision, and they didn't. So now, as we know, we have the current plan for a secure school. I want to say, for one, that I totally agree that a secure school is needed in London. At the moment, some of the most troubled children in London are being placed 200 miles away, being cut off from a family, and this really has to change. But not here, please. I think Alice and I would probably take a different view on what I'm going to say next. As we know, the site selection has been led by Barnet Council and shrouded in total secrecy. They say this is the only site, whilst refusing to reveal any alternatives. And I fear very much that all the public bodies, including Waltham Forest and probably Park Authority, will be lining up to back them up. My local Park Authority representative suggests to me that a secure school is a place for occupation of leisure or recreation and sport, on the grounds that these poor kids will occasionally be allowed to run around the exercise yard, and therefore it is a park-compatible use. To me, this is a gross distortion of meanings. Others may disagree, but I can realistically see that this may need to go on a mole site to allay obvious public anxieties about having a secure school next to them, secure home, however misplaced they are. But to say, as Barnet obviously would say, we can't possibly have it on one of our green sites, that's far too precious. It stinks of double standards. And by the way, Barnet has over 25% open land and 2 underground stations sitting right on the edge of its open land. We are not NIMBYs for saying this is not the right place. This is open space here in the inner city where people most need it. It is bang in the middle of the Lee Valley Park, which is still nominally committed to leisure use, but I fear is about to betray us. It is a site which, with a wonderful and wildly popular scheme for open-air swimming, which I hope still one day to enjoy.
Thank you very much, Laurie. It's a reminder of what we're up against. Thank you. So next we've got Antoinette Fernandez. Antoinette is a member of the Green Party and she is playing a pivotal role in growing the party's impact in Hackney. She increased the vote share and came second in the London Assembly elections earlier this year. She also ran in the de Beauvoir by-election in May and came second by just 119 votes. And of course she ran in the general election, which is still so fresh in our minds, and I think increased the Green Party share again. So we are delighted to see that support for East London Waterworks Park was a key part of Antoinette's manifesto, and we're delighted that she's here with us tonight. Antoinette.
Good evening, and thank you to the organisers for inviting me. I'm going to keep this short. I was first told about the East London Waterworks Park by a friend of a friend in a jazz bar in Dalston. A few margaritas in, he was effusively passionate and protective of this community-led campaign for a park where everyone could have access to wild swimming and wetlands with amazing wildlife. He made it sound like a mini paradise, and his enthusiasm was infectious. So much so that I had to investigate the project, and then when I was asked what I wanted to support as the Green Party's North East constituency candidate, this was still firmly in mind. Access to nature is not a privilege or a luxury, it is a basic need. For us, for other animals, and for the planet. We have destroyed so much of nature to create our city, from cutting down the great forests and woodlands that once covered the region to building over London's rivers. We owe it not just to the land but to ourselves to reintroduce and give back to the life that was once here. I believe the park will be an innovative step towards this. Many are concerned about this latest phase of building proposals from the Department of Education for a secure children's facility. I'm aware that another speaker will discuss this in depth, so I'm simply going to say that the Waterworks Park's proposed forest school will have clear benefits for all children and adults. I would support opportunities for special private access days for children in secure facilities to visit the park and benefit from the mental and physical rewards of being in nature and natural surroundings that I believe I'm right in saying they would not have if the secure facility was indeed built instead. The Green Party is clear in our determination for community consultation and community involvement, especially in urban planning, as infrastructure should be created by the people for the people, and the Waterworks Park is a clear example of that. It should be noted that the Office of National Statistics has stated that 37% of black people have no outdoor space in comparison to 10% of white people. Friends of the Earth created a map which clearly shows that in London, the areas with the least amount of access to outdoor space directly correlates with large communities of people of African descent. Again, in a study for the Commission for Architecture and the Built Environment, Go Parks London found that the majority of the UK's black and minority ethnic communities live in the most deprived wards of English inner cities. Those living in deprived areas recognise and appreciate the value of local green spaces, but they underuse the spaces that are most convenient because these spaces are often poor quality and feel unsafe. In Hackney, our unchecked gentrification means that people from minorities often feel a number of intersectional barriers for accessing these spaces, for fear of safety and abuse, especially for women and girls, and the sense that these spaces are not for minorities due to heavy policing and the nature of the events held in them. The Waterworks Park's inclusivity project, therefore, is essential in overcoming these barriers and providing access to nature for everyone, as we cannot truly live in sync with nature without including everyone, especially the most vulnerable amongst us, irrespective of race or class. Thank you.
Thank you, Antoinette. Really powerful. So last but by no means least, we have Caroline Day. Caroline is a volunteer with East London Waterworks Park. She's also a member of Savely Marshes, and it's in that capacity that she's talking to us today. So Savely Marshes is a grassroots campaign group that formed to oppose the building of a basketball training facility on Leighton Marsh in 2012. and subsequently expanded its remit to oppose all inappropriate use and development of the Lee Marshes. Along with CPRE London, Save Lee Marshes founded the East London Waterworks Park campaign. And over the past 12 years, Caroline has worked tirelessly to promote the message that we are part of nature and that our future is inextricably linked to the future of the natural world. Caroline.
Thank you, Abby. She's also worked for 12 years tirelessly for this part of the world. So looking around at you today, I'm reminded of Mr. Bates versus the Post Office. I hope everyone has seen that amazing docudrama on ITV. If you haven't, go on ITVX and watch it. Now, the reason I'm reminded of that is that looking around, everybody here has also been told only one. So in Mr. Bates versus the Post Office, as this number of people, or perhaps more, stream into their very first public meeting, he says everybody here was told they were the only one that this was happening to. In the same way, everybody here has been told this is the only possible site in the whole of Greater London that this secure facility could go. Now that is completely implausible, I believe, but if they provided us with one shred of evidence, perhaps I would have changed my mind. Perhaps you would have changed your mind and not turned up tonight. Perhaps you're still in two minds. But I would say, if it is the only possible site in all of Greater London, why refuse over 20 FOIs and environmental information regulations asking for the site criteria, asking for what alternative sites were looked at, asking what was ruled in and out of the criteria, asking if ownership of each site was what was relevant to why it was ruled in and out. We have denied, refused every one of those FOIs. The only FOIs that have actually been answered have been ones that are completely unrelated to this site. Now, I'm a person of words rather than numbers, but my speech tonight is going to go on from 1 to 2 and 2 to 3. Now, 2 and 3 go together. This site, the only possible site apparently, and the only suitable site, is half in flood zone 2 and half in flood zone 3. It is next to two rivers, the Lee Navigation, which is a canalised river, and the River Lee, which is still the original old River Lee. Now, it's in close proximity to both. Now, I don't need to tell you, we faced one of the wettest years ever on record. Just this week, I was lucky enough to install a rainwater harvesting system, and it was already overflowing. We have had unprecedented rain, but in the future, we look like we're going to have even more. So to place vulnerable children, at-risk children, on a site which is half in flood zone 3, the most serious category for flooding, seems to me unacceptable and wrong. I'm going to move on now to 4. 4 possible sites, we were told. These are the 4 that we have been given. So out of 450, apparently there was a short list of 70. The 450 have not been given to us. The 70 haven't been given to us. 4 sites were given to us. Now, as Alice has talked about, Metropolitan Open Land has the same planning status as Greenbelt. It was created for a reason, and it was created to create open land for people in the city. And Antoinette talked really about how important that is in a community like this. Now, those 4 possible sites, apparently, all Metropolitan Open Land, all have prior development plans. So essentially, how could they be the final shortlist? Because they already are protected land, or have a development plan in mind. Surely they should have been ruled out at the first juncture. Now 5 brings us on to, I think, what's beautiful about our project. We had over 5,000 donors, and many of them are sitting here in the room today. 5,000 donors, and 5,000 donors generated over £500,000, £500,000 towards creating this park. Now, it's not all the money that was needed to take over and buy this land. No. But our park was going to create £18.5 million in social value. So our offer, for which we got a loan as well as people's money, would be to generate that value. So in society right now, with all the challenges we face, surely we should not just look at a price tag, but we should actually look at true value. And our project would have created that social value. And another 5. We talked about 12 years, and it has been a hard slog against the Lee Valley Park, who haven't got nature and conservation and the natural world in mind. But we have spent 5 years, and many people here have put all of those 5 years into this project. Relentless hard work, hundreds if not thousands of hours for extremely detailed plans, feasibility studies, illustrations, an inclusivity listening project that does things differently. We cannot throw this away, which leads me on to 6. One thing that the developers have said on the website about their criteria is that they require 6 acres of land for this secure facility. 6 acres. This site, 14 acres. So why choose this site, which is so much bigger? So much of that land will be wasted, including the heritage buildings. Now, no one has spoken about the heritage buildings, but there are listed buildings on this site from the 1880s and 1870s, the Engineer's House, which you can see from the Princess of Wales pub, and the Octagonal Sluice House, which you can see on the Lee navigation. This is our precious Lower Lee Valley heritage. Recently, Cody Dock was given thousands of pounds to explore and share that Lower Lee industrial heritage with people. There is so much opportunity to do that here. Which moves me on to 7. The number of times that Novak Djokovic has won Wimbledon. I will sum up now going back to 1. So this is a once-only opportunity. Once this site is built on, it can no longer be East London Waterworks Park. It's one chance to respect the heritage. It's one chance to protect and enhance our natural environment. And it's one chance for the government to do the right thing. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Caroline. And thank you to all our speakers, Alice, Laurie, Antoinette and Caroline. Should you give them another round of applause? Thank you very much. So I want to turn the next half an hour of our meeting over to you. Do you have any thoughts?